preparing a convoy of fighters, medics and civilians to be moved back towards Serbia when the Germans decided it was safe. The commander, an army doctor, said leaving Kosovo was the worst day of his life, and he blamed Yugoslavia's president, Slobodan Milosevic.
Svi ratovi su greška.
Every war is a mistake.
Milosevic's mistake?
Miloševićeva greška u ovom slučaju.
Miloševićeva greška.
Milosevic's mistake.
Milošević's mistake.
A few minutes later, the Germans were trying to save the man they'd shot. His colleague was lying dead in the car. Eyewitnesses said the men were Serbs who'd attacked the Germans. Their weapons were on the pavement.
It's got very ugly here very quickly. There's a lot of hatred in this town and a big desire for revenge from the Serbs and from the ethnic Albanians. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Prizren.
And
The people of Prizren to get off the streets. They've told the people here to get off the streets. This was the square in which the Kosovo Albanians welcomed the Germans when they came in this afternoon. It's the place where the Kosovo Albanians were feeling very safe, and now the Germans are saying, get off the streets, go home, we'll patrol, we'll try and keep the place safe, and what's more, they're trying to keep the two sides apart.
But this really budge, and representing a major political and diplomatic row. He and his few hundred Russian colleagues have spent the entire day denying his supposed NATO colleagues access to the airport west of Pristina. British paratroopers tried and were turned away. The Russians were then presented with the King's Royal Hussars. A Challenger tank left the Russians parked firmly across the road as if they'd never move, only to shift immediately when a local car appeared. Discussion, reasoning, nothing prevailed. A French unit drove up with the intention of installing a fuel pump. The Russians were unmoved at the attempts to explain unity within KFOR.
A fuel depot, and here the NATO told me here in this area. Yes, Russian forces. Russian forces. But we have to work together. I don't know exactly if we have to work together.
A series of niggling incidents in a country lane, leading to phone calls between President Clinton and President Yeltsin. They too reached no agreement. There were more talks at the Russian Foreign Ministry.
Paratroopers arrested several suspected Serb gunmen, and they shot dead another who had apparently refused to give up his weapon. NATO have tough rules of engagement here, and they want to show early on who's boss. When Britain's 4th Armoured Brigade rolled into Pristina today, the Albanian community here went wild with delight.
Supposed to be General Jackson's headquarters, but today Russian troops were still guarding Pristina airport and refusing to let the British Army in. A pair of NATO helicopters came and went, but the strategic airfield, an important part of NATO's plans, remained firmly in the hands of the Russian paratroopers who seized it in the early hours of Saturday morning. Near the airfield perimeter, I found a British patrol and asked them what was going on.
The airport?
Yes.
It's a mix, I believe it's a mixed Russian-British operation.
Yes, we've just been to the airport entrance and there are lots of Russians but no British. Where are the British?
Well, you need to see my boss behind me then. So I'm under the impression they're there.
In fact, British armoured vehicles were refused entry this morning and British officers huddled for hasty consultations. The French had no better luck when they brought a convoy up to the roadblock, where once again the Russians showed no sign of giving way. A French officer explained a little plaintively that his mission was to set up a fuel storage area.
A fuel depot, and
this evening, NATO appeared to give up its efforts to take immediate control of the airport. We found British troops withdrawing. Just one NATO unit remained close by, a Canadian intelligence section with ultra-modern surveillance equipment. It was apparently positioned so NATO can keep track of what the Russians are doing on the strategically vital airfield.
So the Russians Kosovo on their first military occupation since World War II. NATO says the 2 men inside, Serb civilians, had guns and a grenade. 1 is dead. The end of a day of confrontation and clashes. The troops gave the Serb victory salute, but they are retreating. On the road, they carried their flag with pride, but minutes later, in Kosovo's third city, Prizren, it became a provocation. Thousands of Kosovar Albanians who've endured a decade of Serb oppression became enraged as the column passed, and they turned on the retreating troops. With each tractor load of weapons and ammunition, the Serbs were stoned and spat at. The violence grew. The crowd baying for blood. Killers, murderers, they screamed. Suddenly, panic as heavily armed Serb soldiers ran in to the rescue.
There is now a tense and dramatic standoff here. The Yugoslav soldiers have advanced into this town as a unit. The German troops are holding them back. They've fired some shots, and there's a crowd of several thousand people here ready to attack the Yugoslav soldiers.
The crowd taunted the Serbs, and then the moment that power truly changed hands in Prizren, as the Serbian troops were forced away by NATO officers, a German commander pushing them out. Earlier, the Serbs abandoned the border with Albania, snipers coming off the hills.
It's finished?
Finished. Thank God. Thank God.
Look, you got us on the one side. And you got the rest of the world on the other side.
The Serbs are still here, and here in force. Moving ahead of the Italian armoured column, advancing westwards on the road to Peć, we found ourselves in a no-man's land, beyond the front line of freedom. Smoke on the horizon marked the approach of the town the Serbs called Đakovica. They threw themselves on the bonnet of our car to stop us. Their only question, where is it?
And they said they're now burning and they're shooting. We heard shots, so now there's fresh fire, fresh smoke in the Đakovica. Something's happening there.
When the situation was explained by Sky to the column's commander, he gave the signal for the column to advance. NATO's rules of engagement do not cover such situations, but he was determined to take the initiative. As NATO advanced, the Serbs began a quick retreat from a town they've ruled with terror, and only jeers to see them off.
Retreated. When the German contingent of NATO's Kosovo Protection Force, called KFOR, crossed the Albanian-Yugoslavian border, the Yugoslavs, appearing dejected and tired, abandoned their positions. They spoke little. One said only, "I wish I could have gone home sooner." Upon retreat, the Yugoslavian soldiers endured the jeers of Kosovar Albanians, who had feared these soldiers only the day before. Throughout southwest Kosovo, NATO troops filled the vacuum left by the Yugoslav withdrawal. On its way to far west Kosovo. Serb soldiers could only watch as it passed and listen as it was cheered by Kosovar Albanians. Military deployment since World War II, the Germans are learning the perils of peacekeeping.
Were killed when unidentified men opened fire on their vehicle. It happened near Dulja. This is about 25 miles south of Pristina. That's the temporary base for Canadian engineers, who say their units tried unsuccessfully to help the two reporters.
Fighters from the Kosovo Liberation Army, or KLA, took over when the Yugoslav border guards left Friday. They say that no NATO troops have been to visit them since they arrived at the crossing.
Units are continuing to withdraw. Tanks can be seen moving out, but not everyone is giving up. British troops, until the shooting started, were casual. That quickly changed. The same in downtown Pristina. This British Challenger tank crew is parked at a major intersection. They had just been fired upon, they said, and swung their main gun around at the house a hillside away, where they think the shots came from. NATO may not have the airport, but they do control the bus station in Pristina. Late on Sunday, it was filled with NATO troops and at least one tank.
Peacekeeping mission is not being hampered.
This is essentially a political problem. It has to be dealt with in a political manner.
After an hour-long phone call, President Clinton and Russian President Boris Yeltsin decided Russian and NATO generals should decide what to do about the Russian troops at the Pristina airport. On the larger issue of Russian participation in the peacekeeping force KFOR, a possible compromise is emerging. Russian troops wouldn't patrol their own sector, as Moscow has insisted.
We do not believe that there should be a separate Russian sector because we do not want to see any partition of Kosovo.
Instead, as in Bosnia, Russian soldiers would operate in specific areas within one or more of the 5 NATO-designated peacekeeping sectors.
We anticipate some similar type of arrangement coming out of the negotiations that are currently ongoing regarding how we incorporate them into KFOR. But very clearly, a zone of responsibility within a sector would be one way of doing that.
Sources tell CNN the compromise could also allow Russian troops to report to a general from a non-NATO country, perhaps Finland, who would himself report to NATO. The alliance insists that all peacekeepers be under NATO command. Until an agreement...
Like a slow and mighty river, NATO's power surges into Kosovo. And with it, what that power is for. Led by the UN High Commission for Refugees, a convoy of international aid and aid workers crawls over the mountains between Macedonia and the Kosovo capital. The first aid trucks on the road to Pristina since before the NATO bombing began in March. The need now many times greater. In the weeks to come, these 25 trucks will be followed by thousands in the titanic effort to heal and rebuild Kosovo. Little incident. Last night was fairly quiet. The sniper who had been active in town the night before gave up his job, apparently. Some helicopter happens, they come out to investigate. What they seem to have been investigating was a wounded person lying under an overpass about a quarter of a mile from here.
They're actually moving towards the hospital here because we've just heard the Serbian paramilitary forces have retaken the hospital grounds. And while those tanks are advancing, you can see the line of cars next to them. They are the Serb civilians trying to leave here. But actually, if you go round, if you come back towards me, round the corner of the building where I'm actually doing this live from, there's a Serb armored car, fully kitted out with its weapons and its soldiers, just around the building here. So the Serbs have not withdrawn from this place, and when I was walking to this live spot, we got shot at. I don't know why, where it came from, who it is. No one is in control of this town. NATO's not in control of this town, and the Serbs are still...
That they would come across the evidence of atrocities sooner or later. It's turned out to be sooner. In the village of Kajanik in southern Kosovo, British paratroopers have reported seeing evidence of a mass grave and hearing accounts of the killings from local Albanians.
We're in the graveyard yesterday.
In their deployment, they have not had any harassment from the retreating Serb and Yugoslav soldiers. They report one incident today of one unruly soldier trying to pull a handgun, but they said that he was subdued by his own fellow soldiers, and it did not come to anything. They have had verbal insults and obscene finger gestures from the retreating Serbs, but nothing that they say they're terribly worried about. In addition, hundreds of Marines have gone forward from here and are setting up base further east into Kosovo, and we've seen also some very poignant scenes. Behind me you can see more of these army vehicles coming down the road and bolstering and boosting this position here. But really, as we came into Kosovo, it's almost like a ghost town from the border to here. Very, very few people, a lot of evidence of damage and destruction to homes on the sides of the road, but many, many people wanting to come home.
Quds continues. Everywhere it's the same, wherever you look. Here is the village of Stimje. They hope to rebuild a future from a shattered past. This man said the arrival of the Italian column again spurred an exodus of Serbian civilians.
Everything they stole, the cars and our things inside.
Why
they burned the houses.
They're your neighbors. As German armor liberated Prizren, the soldiers had to keep back the enthusiasm of the crowds. But at the other end of the street, the cheers turned to jeers as the Serbian armor left. Milosevic and his men have no future here, but they've left a legacy of hate and fear.
To pack up and
Most of the Serb vehicles here are being used by the army, most of the lorries and their trailers being used by the army to move out. 200 meters down the road, more barracks, the MUP, the rather feared interior police. But then another 200 meters down the road, the UCK, the Kosovo Liberation Army, has set up their headquarters. So there you had 3 armies, or 4 armies in effect, set up all within a 500-meter area, all talking to each other, and all sort of, I think, probably allowing each other to go about their business. And now, just behind us here, at the Grand Hotel, Sky's cameraman Martin Smith was out there.
Pristina, British forces are now planning their next move. These are reconnaissance vehicles scouring the northern limits of Pristina, looking at the lie of the land ahead for Britain's armoured brigade, and monitoring the movement of Serb forces. Armoured troop carriers are now patrolling throughout Pristina, a very visible symbol of NATO's authority here. What these British troops are trying to do today is to consolidate their hold on Pristina. All Serb forces have to be out of here by tomorrow. The plan is for British troops to push up behind them and fill the vacuum in northern Kosovo. The push could come as early as tonight, but today there was still tension in the capital. Here, soldiers have been told Serb troops have blocked a side road where 7 Serb tanks and other military equipment are being stored. Albanians living in the road have been too scared to return to their homes for weeks. This man thought the Serbs had already gone, but when he was told they haven't, he sought sanctuary in the army's armoured vehicle. A few minutes later, we watched a convoy of Serb military trucks go down the road. And then British troops escorted us to see the roadblock. The Albanian locals had told us there are bodies of people killed by the Serbs still in the houses, but there is no confirmation. Then the Serbs told us to stop filming. Within the last hour, more British troops and a special forces unit arrived in the area to monitor the situation. Mark Austin, ITN, Pristina, Kosovo.
Rumbles through the streets of Pristina, but their mission now is to escort vehicles carrying out their army's evacuation. Under the agreement, the Yugoslav army must be out of Pristina by midnight tomorrow. We found them clearing out their offices with no great sense of urgency and burning documents that they don't want to leave behind. Major Ben Farrell of the British Army is handling the removal of the armed police, the so-called MUP, which was the iron and blood-stained hand of the Yugoslav government in Kosovo. But today, the MUP colonel greeting him was charm itself, as his interpreter handed Major Farrell a key to the office he will now occupy at police headquarters, where a small number of Serb policemen will be allowed to stay after tomorrow's deadline.
This is no more surprises, and NATO insists its Kosovo operation is hardly being disrupted by the presence of a mere 200 to 300 Russian soldiers in Pristina. The fact that the Russian troops remain in position today, deciding who does and who doesn't get to use the key road to the airport, is undoubtedly an embarrassment and a worrying portent of the future if NATO and Moscow fail to agree to a unified command structure. President Clinton, the larger deployment of the Peace Force, the first American troops have now entered the province. More than 1,000 Marines greeted by ethnic Albanians as they cross the border from Macedonia on their way to the southeast of Kosovo, which will become the US sector. Paul Davis.
Forces. Today, I can tell you it's firmly in the hands of the US Army's 82nd Airborne Brigade out of Fort Bragg in North Carolina. They've been tasked with searching each and every one of these refugees to try and make sure no arms go back into Kosovo. I can tell you they say that they've seized at least 2 handguns in the past 24 hours, but nothing any more serious than that.
Incredibly, the French tried, the Italians tried, the British tried. But the Russians, despite the fact that they're a small force of only 200, and the Russian foreign minister in Moscow has given assurances that no more would follow them, stubbornly held their ground. Today, NATO says that a temporary forward headquarters is being established to the south of the town, and that the British NATO Commander General Sir Michael Jackson will later meet the newly promoted Russian General Viktor Zavazin in an attempt to integrate their forces. British Army medics took away a Serb who'd been shot in the head. He was believed to be a soldier or policeman travelling in civilian clothes with his colleagues in a car which came under attack. German NATO forces crossing into Kosovo from Albania have been obliged to prevent ethnic Albanian refugees from doing the same, keeping them at bay with barbed wire and a row of soldiers. The Albanians are desperate to return to their homes, but the danger and uncertainties of Kosovo are too great, and they must wait, perhaps for weeks.
Slowly but surely, NATO's armoured advance continues. Everywhere it's the same, wherever you look. Here is the village of Stimje. They hope to rebuild a future from a shattered past.
Was a man with a gun who was...
Well, he would have come out, started brandishing the pistol, will be warned, and they'll say, stop, please stop, stop, bang. And that's the end of it.
What about giving that warning in other languages, though? I mean, obviously stop's pretty understandable, but...
Well, quite frankly, the warning will be given in as the best language they can, but soldiers don't speak all languages. But quite frankly, they'll also probably be trained in what...
Months of pent-up frustration and anger spilled out as Kosovars watched the long column of paramilitaries leave their town. The civilian
1st U.S. Infantry Division have started to deploy, setting up base camps, and they are really being treated as a liberating army by the ethnic Albanians, some of whom are trickling back and getting courage from the fact that the U.S. troops are in their sector, going home to look at their houses. Many of them have found them really trashed and some destroyed. At the same time, Yugoslav army troops are pulling out. According to the agreement for the phased withdrawal of Yugoslav army troops and Serb forces, they must be out of this particular area by tomorrow. And therefore, we have seen long convoys of armored personnel carriers, some tanks, many army trucks carrying out army personnel and equipment. For the most part, it has gone smoothly. There have been no incidents, according to U.S. troops, just some verbal harassment and some obscene gestures, and indeed a few smiles and waves from some...
Robust peacekeeping was the brief, and that's exactly what faces these KFOR troops for an indefinite period, because the two sides in this conflict are neighbours, and neither must be allowed to get the upper hand.
But those are civil matters. The soldiers must just go. Still time for a little extra destruction before they make their angry, defiant, but ignominious withdrawal, leaving NATO to fill the vacuum. Andrew Wilson, Sky News, in Pristina.
Established to the south of the town, and there will be further meetings today to try to get the forces integrated. And the tense conference have agreed there should be an intensification of dialogue, especially between military officials, to work on an agreement. And the US and Russian defense ministers are likely to meet this week. The army and some paramilitary police have been reluctant to leave Pristina, but through the day their convoys have been heading out of town. For the NATO troops, and at the border they were obliged to prevent ethnic Albanian refugees from crossing into Kosovo because of the dangers. On the Kosovo-Montenegro border, the problem is with Serb refugees fleeing Kosovo. Over 5,000 have crossed in the past 48 hours. Dale Levac.
The defeat of Prizren's Serbs has been sealed. Prizren's Albanians are glorying in it. Innocent Serbs have suffered enormously since Yugoslavia started breaking up. But not one tear was shed for them by the people who stayed behind in Prizren, who suffered so much themselves at the hands of Serb forces.
This is a disaster for the Serbs and a day of triumph for the Albanians. KFOR's biggest challenge now is controlling the rage and the desire for revenge that both sides have.
Then it was the Serbian military's turn. Some of them tried to get out of town as quickly as possible. Others slowed down to eyeball Albanians one last time. The convoy had hundreds of vehicles, thousands of people. It headed for Serbia through the mountains to avoid Albanian KLA fighters. And back in Prizren, Kosovo Albanians celebrated. They decided to stop singing and dancing when the war with the Serbs started. Now it's over, and as far as they're concerned, they've won. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News.
As the conviction of German soldiers by firing at a tank were cut down. A hail of bullets heralding the arrival of NATO's new hardline shoot-to-kill policy. The few Serbs who dare to remain have sought sanctuary in a church, some too frail to flee and too scared to go home. As the people of Prizren returned to homes commandeered by the Serbs, they found a terrifying array of weapons and booby traps. It'll take an army of experts to make these homes safe once more. But the
reassures them with professional patrolling so they know that they are secure and they know that their future is safe.
The British are thundering around to the outlying villages, covering every dot on the map. In Serb areas there is sullenness. In Albanian the euphoria continues. The Green Howards are heroes to the people of Avalier.
All the Albanian people
too happy to be seen in their present situation. And late this afternoon, hundreds more Serb soldiers were rolling up to go. Men posing, gesturing, yelling abuse at NATO. Past them went the Green Howards from the Irish Guards battle group to the Serb chagrin heading for the suburb which bears the name treasured in Serb history, Kosovo Polje, in honor of the battle all Serbs glory in 600 years ago. In went the British to find large numbers of the feared special police, much discomforted by their arrival. They too have to leave. Their resentment was plain. They too have reasons not to appear on camera.
The name Kosovo Polje means everything to Serbia. The fact that it is no longer under Serb control and under the eyes of British NATO troops will strike at the heart of